First media session and open training of the year in Beaverton, Oregon for the Portland Timbers. It was a heavily attended event. Let's talk about how it went down. Of course, the headliner of media today and what most of you want to know about is the Evander situation. The Portland Timbers star was not at training, but according to sources within the club, it was an excused absence. Him and fellow Brazilian Anthony are both working through green card issues. So if you've been seeing Evander post in Brazil, as of right now, according to the club, it is an excused absence. On the training pitch before media, we saw João Ortiz, the 28-year-old Ecuadorian international, training with the club for the first time. That signing became official yesterday. And while not in training gear, Kelsy was out there as well, a signing that has still not become official. I expect that to be announced within the next 48 hours. But he walked out with Timbers GM Ned Grabavoy onto the training pitch, gave a hug to head coach Phil Neville, and also met a lot of the team behind the scenes today as well. Let's go over to the media part of it. Phil Neville and Ned Grabavoy were the first two to speak. Let's talk about the Timbers GM. Off the bat, he talked about needing to strengthen the back line. When I asked him about it, that's the one thing he said right away.
Where else in the squad are you looking to strengthen or add depth before the season starts?
Yeah, backline, and we've looked in a few different spots, and I think we have to make one key addition before the season starts, but then I also think, we may have the ability, depending on where the roster goes and takes shape, that if there's another, very quality defender, we would potentially look to add an additional one, prior to maybe even the close of the primary transfer window.
And Phil Neville talked about the back line as well.
Probably the nucleus of that back four have probably conceded the same amount of goals, so something has to change or it's the definition of insanity.
Moving over to Evander, I'm going to put in the full cuts of each Phil Neville and Ned Grabavoy so you can decipher their words for your own. Here is first what Ned Grabavoy said about the Evander situation.
I was pretty clear in the press conference at the end of last season that I would still remain open to trying to find a path back towards Evander being in Portland and being happy with us. And I'm not closed off to that. But then again, we also have to do what's best for the club. And this is a big commitment to a player that we're building around. And it needs to be a mutual commitment. And with that, it's sort of how we go forward and try to build a roster that can compete and win. So we have to look at both scenarios, of what's best for the club, what makes sense for everybody. We'll continue to do that, in all honesty. There's obviously been some interest in Evander as well. So we have to continue to just sort of walk forward, but I wouldn't count anything out at this point.
Over to Phil Neville. Here's what he said about the Brazilian star.
Do you expect him to report once the visa issues have been resolved?
Yeah, I think you don't disown your sons. That's the first thing. And I've got a son, and if he does wrong, I don't just throw him out the door and say never come back. I think you all know my feelings towards this player. We've had an open dialogue throughout the whole of the off season. I think there's been a lot of accountability shown on his part. But I'm building a team here and a culture to win. And on that, when you build something and you want to win, you need everybody on the bus heading in the same direction. And I think that's the question over the next couple of weeks that we'll probably find out. And I'd say that, will he always have a special place? Yes, always, whether he's here or not. Evander is someone that I tried to sign in Miami, and he's someone that I think last year we got the absolute best out of. He was MVP level. But at the end of the day, I've got a job to do at this football club, that we want the right players in the right moments, with the right culture that will fit into the team ethic. And I'd say that him and Anthony are on the green card process at this moment in time. When that finishes, because I think if you know the green card process, it could be 10 days, it could be 2 weeks. We expect him back, and then we'll speak, and then we will behind closed doors make a decision whether he's the right person for the number 10 shirt or he's not. And I think that's probably as fair as I can answer.
Something I found interesting during Phil Neville's press conference was how much he was pushing for the youth movement. He talked about players like Finn Sermon, Santiago Moreno, Juan Mascara, now Kelsy in the mix, David Ashala, of course, as players that could be getting phone calls from major clubs in Europe in the near future. He talked about how this is going to be a real quick and young team.
We're looking for a couple of more pieces to add to that as well. We've had a distinct plan probably a month before the end of the season. We knew what we wanted, what we needed to do. I do want to continue to evolve this roster. I think you've seen that with some of the moves that we've made. We're going to have a real quick young team. You know, I was looking through the roster just before I came into the press conference, and you know, with Kevin added to it, hopefully maybe one more young player, we're going to have real speed in our team.
Beyond Ned Grabavoy and Phil Neville, there was 4 players who talked at media. João Ortiz, who spoke through a translator, as I mentioned, talked about the position and play style Timber fans can expect from him. He talked about how he's a mobile number 5 that has the physicality to go from box to box. While he didn't say it in his own words, he can provide depth for Diego Chara or David Ashala, the presumed starters in midfield. His passing numbers actually pop off the page when you look at them from his time in Ecuador. Also, we heard from Ari Lassiter, who's going to be a depth forward option. He is one of the most versatile players in MLS and has played at 6 different stops across the league, but his experience should help the Timbers, and he'll likely be a backup winger for Jonathan Rodriguez to start this season. Elsewhere, we saw Diego Chara come to the podium, as he usually does to start this season. I asked him, what was there moments last year where you didn't expect to come back? And what was the ultimate factor that you did decide to come back for 2025?
To be honest, I think I have something left in mind. I always trying to be honest. First of all, myself, with the club, and if I am here, it's because I can continue playing. Obviously, it's hard, it's at 38, but I feel the energy to continue. Obviously, this year is going to be challenging for me, and I think I'm prepared enough to do it.
And what are those conversations like with Phil? You said this year is going to be challenging. What's the big challenge you feel you're going to face?
So right now it's just focusing preseason, but I think during the day by day, I think Phil is going to see if I'm prepared to continue doing starting or not.
One of the final remarks of the press conference was, how does the locker room react to the Evander situation right now? And here's the answer that Canadian goalkeeper and presumed starter for the 2025 season, Max Crepeau, gave.
Was the most important player on the field for us last year, and he's an important piece to the organization for the past 2 years, because we know the raw talent that this guy has. I honestly don't know how Ned and Phil approached these answers, but from my perspective in the locker room, we love the personality of it. He has the raw talent player, but for the organization and players, and I'm speaking for myself here, you want players that want to be in that locker room right now. And so for the success for the organization in the near future and on the long run for the next 4 or 5 years, you want to have players that want to be here and want to bleed for the jersey and bleed for the organization. And so for sure it's a delicate situation and subject, because he's such a quality player, and obviously we all know how last year ended. But as a player perspective, me, Max, I want to fight and die for the guys who are here and wants to be here.
I'll be giving media roundups all season long, so stick with me. I'm Adam Sussman, and this was your Timbers Media Roundup.